Welcome to the world of Faust, where deals with the devil leave you doused. In guilt, in love, in moral stress, a tragic tale, but quite the mess.
That wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, actually. Well done. You introduced it.
So with that, everyone, we're talking about the classic, the big man, the absolute giant, Faust by Goethe today. And
Yeah, baby.
this book is not exactly mandatory in German high school, but most kids in my year read it. I did not, because I did not choose, I think it's called AP, right, in the English? Like, you choose AP classes.
Maybe in American high schools, but yeah.
Yeah,
Not in
like
the
you choose
UK.
some classes where you take advanced stuff, and they read Faust, but since I did not choose advanced German because I'm illiterate, I don't even think we read books, to be honest. I don't remember what we did, but so yeah, it's like the Shakespeare, probably in the UK or whatever, they make you read Shakespeare, but in Germany they make you read Goethe. So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. Faust was something that I was, I guess, kind of always in the background, but never really like paid a huge amount of attention to, and never really like learned too much about the whole, like, I'd come across the term Faustian bargain before, but I was never particularly, aware of what the connection was. But yeah, hearing from you that this is something that German kids learn in school was quite made this quite I was quite looking forward to this read because of that. And we've gone through some German influential texts before with Nietzsche, and I think one of the things that happens when you talk about Nietzsche in Germany is the amount of phrases that have become like common parlance in German because of him. It doesn't seem to be the case so much with Goethe, but maybe we can talk about that. But it's definitely one of those books that you come across, and the more you learn about, the more you kind of realize that you're dealing with something that's been constantly poured over for thousands of years at this point, in the same way as Dante, for example.
Yeah, Goethe is very well known in Germany to be, kind of a Shakespearean figure also, in that he contributed to the overall language and everything. And we have some sayings, some not platitudes, you know what I mean? Some like phrases that originate from Goethe. So, he's everywhere. And, well, I think the main reason why I wanted to read this, it's always been in the background and I skipped out on it at school, but the main thing that kind of reminded me of reading Faust is reading about Marx. And Marx's favorite literary quote is actually from Faust. And
I didn't know that.
Is very telling about Marx as a person and about the nature of socialism, I think. So I will mention that when we get to that part in the book.
Cool.
So today we'll just be discussing part 1, and maybe let's take it away then.
I think there's a couple of things to kind of like go to put out there first. Goethe was born in 1749 and died in 1932. So this book it's old, but it's not like Dante old. And it's obviously kind of it takes a lot of inspiration from a lot of religious Greek mythology and stuff like that. But the book itself, the two parts were written over the course of his life, and I think basically over the course of his whole life, with part 2 being published after his death. And in the annotated version that I've been reading, which is, I can find out now, the New Oxford translation. There are some really good annotations, and I think it's one of those books as well which really, really lends to having annotations, because there are a lot of references to a lot of different like things that are based in mythology, and also things that like reference the literary scene at the time, and things that relate to Goethe's own life specifically, as well as like analysis of how these different fragments of the book were connected together over the course of his life, which I assume are kind of based on like the manuscripts that were available to historians that are researching the book. So it's presented as one thing, but it was actually, the course of a whole life. And I think the earliest version of the book is referred to as Faust, which was developed early in his life, and it was first printed in what's called the fragments, which became part 1, and then part 2 was published posthumously, and so we'll be covering part 1 today. Apparently part 2 is a bit of a mess. Part 1 I think has also kind of some of the hallmarks of like classic literature, where everything can kind of be a bit of a mess, kind of be a bit rambling here and there, but like it's kind of part of the parcel when you're reading books that are old like this.
Well, the whole thing is a fucking poem, so I was really curious how this translated in English, because I had like a Dante moment when we read Purgatory, where if I just read it for myself as like a text, it didn't make any fucking sense. But then I listened to an audiobook chapter, just one chapter, and like the guy had a specific rhythm and pronounced like not even just a rhythm, but the intonation of the sentence endings, and that made everything rhyme even though it didn't rhyme otherwise, and like that way it made sense. And then when having listened to that, I was then able to read it for myself and make it sound properly, which was quite a big transformation.
I think that so you read it in English, did you? This
I read the German. No. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So I did a little bit of research. This was a little while ago when I was choosing the translation to use, so I can't remember exactly why I ended up going with this translation. It kind of just seemed to be the most robust one, but it is also a translation that was rhymed rather than prose, because you do get some translations with Dante as well which just kind of for I think good reason, for their own specific reasons, ignore the rhyme and just try and translate it as prose. But with my experience of reading this, so I listened to a couple of lectures from a couple of different people. One was by David Sugro, I think his name is, who's got some really amazing old lectures on YouTube. And so I didn't go in cold basically with this book like I normally do. And I think, to be honest, if I had gone in cold, it would have been a lot more frustrating to kind of understand what was happening and understand the significance of things that are happening. But I would also, yeah. I do want to talk about the use of rhyme in this book, in my translation, and see how it compares to you, because I do think there were some quite interesting creative applications of it at times.
Okay, yeah. So we'll have the English-German comparison going on. That's good. So thank you for the nice introduction. And there were some stuff in there I didn't know. I didn't really do any research on the book, to be honest. So, yeah, with that being said, let's go into the contents. So we start out by being introduced to this Faust character as a kind of secluded scholar who has a very negative outlook on the world. He's being described as having mastered most of the academic fields. I think he's also a physician, or was a physician with some skill. So he's kind of tired of Earth, and he thinks Earth has nothing more to offer to him, and he's looking for some greater spiritual thing. I think he's also being tired of Christianity. It's not said that he's like an atheist or anything, but he's looking into other things like black magic and that kind of stuff too, or like brewing potions, alchemy. So yeah, but not enthusiastically, not like, oh, I'm gonna find the Holy Grail or I'm gonna make gold. More just like, oh, everything sucks, so I guess I might as well do this.
We were introduced to him. There is actually important chapters we need to discuss before we reach Faust, but because it's actually the fourth chapter that we actually hear from him first. But when we are introduced to him, he's basically like, oh well, I've done philosophy, I've finished law, I've finished medicine, I've 100%ed them all, and my life has just been kind of this, wheeling through these different books and passages and acquiring knowledge, but all of it's just paper. And really, I kind of like, I'm jealous of this of the experience of the natural world. And when I think about, the sun, the moon light that's coming through the window, it's like making these pages of paper look like dog shit. And all these libraries that we have are just full of dust. So and I think really what he's like saying here is that like it's like this rational versus irrational kind of thing of like, I've made sense of all these things through this like academic process or through this like rational process, and I haven't actually come out this other end of that with any real understanding of the experience of life. And I long for this like, romantic idea of living. Whether or not that's the kind of, message of the book itself, or whether that's also kind of a flaw in his character as like, the academic who is torn between this like romanticized idea of what the beauty of life is like. I can't really say, but yeah, that's how we reach him.
His character overall just seems like a complete asshole. I mean, we'll get to it when we come to Gretchen and all the love affair stuff, but this is not like a great guy, right?
Not at all. No, he's not the kind of like, I found myself thinking about Nietzsche in the beginning, because I think with like Zarathustra, there's this kind of cool like balance within this like experience of living life, where like mastery of like knowledge is part, but it's not everything. And Faust himself is kind of like, he knows he's a genius. Clearly, he's like, he's mastered so many things, but he's actually pretty morally bankrupt, and which leads him to make this deal with the devil without really much resistance in the first place. There's one thing that I want to say before we go any further. So it's chapter 4 when we're introduced to Faust, but before that we have in chapter 3 this prologue, the prologue in heaven, which is a dialogue between the archangels, Mephistopheles, who is the primary or kind of secondary character in this whole book, who is essentially the devil, and God himself, the Lord, where God and the devil essentially are speaking about the world. And Mephistopheles who is the devil, kind of also has this kind of, similar to Faust, this kind of pessimistic view about humans, that they just kind of do things and they have, there's nothing valuable about their life, or that they're just kind of ants almost. And God, which I guess he's not particularly like explicit about how he feels about things, but Mephistopheles basically asks God if he can visit Faust and like do stuff with him. He wants to corrupt him.
It's kind of the it's kind of the bet, like in the story of Job, right?
Yeah.
Where God is like, the devil kind of tempts this guy, like, oh, you think this guy is your... I guess the difference is that in the Job story, Job is a true servant of God, and Faust is not really. But the idea is like, let's try if we can break this guy, and God is like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. There's a great quote in this chapter where Mephistopheles says, "I'll make him greedy for the dust, the way the serpent was, my famous ancestress," which is obviously a reference to Genesis, with the serpents eating the dust. And I love the expression, make him greedy for the dust, make him want the dust. There's quite a...
some fucking sexual shit right there. Oh yeah, you want the dust, huh?
But there is I do like the way that the devil is portrayed through Mephistopheles in this book. So Mephistopheles basically has permission now to try this thing with Faust. And so Faust is in his chamber. He's miserable. He says, quote, "No dog would put up with such an existence," which is kind of this reference to direct experience of life versus intellectualizing of life, so much that a dog wouldn't even would get depressed and kill themselves. And of course, he then contemplates suicide by seeing this elixir that he has in front of him.
Yeah, I didn't understand why he doesn't end up drinking it in the end. Why he decides against it. I didn't really pick that up.
The end of the book or the chapter?
No, in the chapter. He has this suicide potion and then he just doesn't drink it, but I didn't understand why.
Who knows? Again, going back to the way that this book was constructed, like there are some points in the book, in the edition that I was reading, which kind of plainly say like this is very not in keeping with this specific section is actually very inconsistent with what we kind of understand as the rest of the story, etc., etc. So I don't know. There's like it's not like there's a perfect logic running through all the actions and all the events of this book. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so from then on, we get introduced to another character, Wagner, right?
Yes.
And this kind of confused me, because unless Wagner comes up in part 2, which I don't know, because I haven't read that far yet, but this Wagner guy seems to serve no other purpose than to just be called stupid and annoying. Like, he shows up and then Faust is like, oh my god, it's Wagner. Guys, close all doors, close all windows. Fucking Wagner's coming to my office again. What do you want, Wagner? And he's like, oh, I love you so much, Faust Summer. And then Faust is like, get the fuck off.
I think Wagner is supposed to kind of like, maybe he's like supposed to be the, blind like zeitgeist, like representation of the academic culture of the time, that's like completely drunk the Kool-Aid and is supposed to be this like a way of comparing a contrast against a foil against Faust.
I guess so, but like it just seems like Wagner seems to live a more interesting or fulfilled life than Faust. Like, he's shitting on Wagner, but Wagner is like really interested in the world and about learning, and Faust is just this nihilistic piece of shit. So
yeah, I can't disagree.
I was
with
feeling
you.
bad for Wagner, and then he never comes up again in part 1, I think. So that's that, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and then we have the walk with the poodle. So, and there's some other stuff with like townspeople, but it doesn't really matter. So you can pick that up if you want. But the next big thing that happens is they see this poodle, and Faust is like, that poodle's weird, and Wagner's like, no, it's just a poodle, I guess. And I guess he takes it home. There's a lot of like environmental storytelling without us seeing the actual environment, so it's very confusing. Yes. He never really explains what's happening concretely. Yes. You have to kind of infer it from the dialogue. But at a later point, we're in Faust's study again, and the poodle is also there, and one thing leads to another, and we find out that the poodle actually was Mephistopheles, the devil in disguise.
Yeah. So he what happens is he's back in his chamber after walking around with Wagner, and the poodle is like, I think he's like annoying him. He keeps barking, keeps making noise. So he forces the dog into the corner, and then out pops Mephistopheles dressed as like a traveling student. It's described in my book, and I think it's so like a guy with like a cloak and stuff. And they discuss. It's kind of becomes clear to Faust that Mephistopheles is demonic, and because they start talking about like the pentagram which Faust has carved into his doorway, which was apparently like a way of warding off witches in the time. You draw a pentagram, but because like the lines weren't perfectly drawn, it allowed Mephistopheles to come in And so when Faust realizes, he's like, oh, so you have a code. Like, there are things that you can and can't do, right? You have some kind of law that you live by. So maybe I can make a pact with you.
Yeah, this is very strange, because for some reason there's all these rules about devils and like the rules of the underworld, and he's like, at the end he opens the window and is like, you can go, and then he's like, no, I can't go through the window. I have to leave where I entered. It's the rule of the devil, of hell or whatever. Yeah. So he has to go back through the same door that he came from. I wonder if there's anything more to that, because it kind of struck me, but I thought it was just interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what it's based in, but I mean, the whole story wouldn't work if the devil was abided by no law, no rule.
I guess so, yeah. It's like God is all powerful, but the devil can only do sneaky shit within a given framework, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I'm interested to talk about part 2, because I do know what happens, and I think within this conversation there's quite a lot to talk about there too. But yeah, so for some reason the devil can't return the way that he can only return the way that he came, and so Faust sees this and he goes, okay, so maybe you're someone that I can trust with a rule or a law. And then Faust goes to basically ask, he asks Mephistopheles to enter into a pact with him. But again, also, this is, confusing as well. Mephistopheles doesn't immediately agree, even though that was clearly the reason why he came, which we know because of this whole prologue. Instead, he's like, I should leave first. And maybe this is kind of part of his whole grand plan of deception, that someone as smart as Faust would have to really feel like he's worked for this in order for him to agree to the terms that he ends up agreeing to.
Yeah, it feels like the 18th century variant of leaving someone unread for a while.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I won't answer this right now because then I'll seem needy. So I'll just let it sit for a couple days. That's pretty much it, right? People don't change.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is one quote in the speech that Mephistopheles gives where he explains who he is and what he is. This is a Marx thing. So in the German it says, Ich bin der Geist, der stets verneint. Und das mit Recht, denn alles, was entsteht, ist wert, dass es zugrunde geht. Which in English is something like, I am the spirit that denies all that exists deserves to perish. And
yes.
There are some biographies on Marx that explain that within his family, his wife and his children all knew that this was his favorite passage because he kept walking around the house reciting this all the time, which is demonic as fuck. And yeah, so to everyone who's like, yeah, communism is just it's a great idea in theory, just in practice it didn't work out. No, it's fucking satanic to the core, dude. Like, the whole point is to literally kill everything. That's whether Marx was aware of that or not, that was kind of there from the beginning, and that's exactly what it did. So
right. Do you know what the line number is for that?
No, it is in the first the study room.
I know what
whatever it's
section,
called in
but if your edition has line numbers, then I can read it in English as well.
It does not have line numbers. It's 2 pages into that chapter, but
I do have it highlighted, but I can't find it.
Well, shit.
Well, shit. I've got it. I am the spirit of perpetual negation, and rightly so, for all things that exist deserve to perish and would not be missed. Much better it would be if nothing were brought into being. Thus what you men call destruction, sin, evil in short, is all my sphere, the element I most prefer. So he's like, yeah, I'm basically the everything bad. If there's something good, I'm the opposite of that. Great.
So, good stuff. Very chilling passage.
So
considered in its historical context.
So Faust tries to keep Mephistopheles in, having learnt this rule of his. But the Mephistopheles ends up kind of tricking him. He falls asleep, and then Mephistopheles manages to escape. But he comes back the next morning, and he, comes back saying, "Let's do this deal." And he says to Faust, "I will serve you, but in the afterlife you will serve me, forever and into eternity."
I think the specifics of the deal are, if Faust ever says, Faust is tired of life, right? So if Mephistopheles manages to make Faust say, what's the exact quote? It's something like, "Oh, I'm so glad that I was born. This is amazing," basically. If he affirms life in a way, if he says something that makes him glad to have experienced and lived, then Faust wins the bargain, Mephistopheles wins the bargain, and Faust has to serve in hell forever.
Yes. He's basically, if he experiences a moment that he wants to prolong because of how beautiful it is, that's the thing that will
that was it.
That's how he fails. And there is an actual here it says, if ever to the moment I shall say, beautiful moment, do not pass away, then you may forge your chains to bind me, then I will put my life behind me, then let them hear my death knell toll, then from your labours you'll be free, the clock may stop, the clock hands fall, and time come to an end for me. This is something that came up a lot in the lectures that I was listening to about Faust. This moment, please stay, don't go away kind of thing. And I guess, it's weird to me that is the affirmation of life or something, because or that is what he's necessarily missing. I guess he's kind of going through life as if it's just this collection of experiences and nothing really matters and he doesn't care about anything. But it's interesting that to appreciate life or to care about life in this book is manifests through this clinging to a situation and wanting something to not end,
That makes sense, right? I mean, do you say that it doesn't make sense to you, or?
Well, partly because, like, you know, clinging to experience, it can also become a source of pain.
Sure, but then you wouldn't. That's more like trauma, right? I think this is more like this brief moment is so nice. I wish it would last longer. I wish I would live instead of not.
It's different. It's different to trauma. At least what I'm describing. It's more like, instead of accepting that life is essentially a collection of all these fleeting moments, you can't stop a sunset from setting, even though you might want it to stay forever. And the fact that you find this thing so beautiful and want it to, and can think in your mind that I don't want this to ever end, is also kind of a source of pain too, right? At least, like when you like, but this is also like this is like the Buddhist teaching, right? It's like your wants are what creates pain for you, and you're like and also your conception of yourself within this experience is what creates pain for you. Whereas in this book, it's like the conception of like appreciating an experience. Oh, it's hard to really even kind of talk about, because it's like, it feels like it's hard to put into words, I think, because it feels like such a fundamental thing. But like, here, the ultimate thing that you can achieve in life is getting to this point where you're like, I wish this thing didn't end. Whereas the Buddhist teaching, at least in a really like ham-fisted, broad speaking way, would be like, clinging to the moment is suffering.
Yeah, I don't know why he chose that exact phrasing, but I think one use of it is just to highlight how nihilistic Faust is, because he's basically saying, the way this deal is set up is like, life sucks, and I'm so certain that it sucks that I'm willing to bet that even if there was one moment that didn't suck, that then you can make me suffer for all eternity. So there's no way to win for Faust, really. Like, if he loses the bet, then he loses because life sucked. And if he wins the bet, then he had one moment of happiness or whatever, or of longing or whatever. But if that happens, then he loses for all eternity. So it's like the ultimate nihilist bet, right?
Yeah, it's an absolutely terrible decision.
Yeah.
But the upside on, it feels so stupid to me, because it's like, at least I have a really hard time like getting into Faust's shoes, and like, let's put aside the fact that like the whole eternal damnation in the afterlife, and just like talk about the first part, because he's essentially like, he's like, he knows that there's no like real romantic, magical, enchanting like experience in life that can't be put into words. At least that's what he like claims to believe. So why does he choose to go with Mephistopheles and be like, okay, let's go on this joyride now of like base pleasures and magic and doing whatever we want, because that also, he surely knows that also won't satisfy him. He's just at such like, is he just at like such a like deep level of pessimism that it's just like, I could either do this or I could either kill myself. It doesn't matter.
I think that's where he's at. So
yeah,
but Yeah, so he decides to accept the bet, and as you said, things pick up from there into a kind of joyride of base pleasures and all that. I think they first go to like a tavern, and
Yeah.
the scene, the point of that scene, I think, is just to illustrate that Faust isn't interested in drinking or like that kind of hanging out with the boys and getting shit faced kind of base pleasures. So
Yeah.
then they try something else, and he forgot the exact moment of the scene, but essentially he sees this girl and he's like, I want her.
Yeah.
And the first thing that struck me as odd here is that even though Faust had already resigned himself to complete pessimism and everything earthly sucks, he seems to look at this girl and like apparently fall in love or something like that, something close to that at least. He later acts like a person who is not in love, so I'm hesitant to say that he is in love, but it's weird that it didn't really take any manipulation on Mephistopheles' side to already make Faust feel like he's glad to have lived in a way, right? He's like falling in love and this is awesome.
Well,
just you just walk down the street, bro. Like,
but I think, whilst the language when we first meet Gretchen is that, you know, this fair maiden, this lovely girl, blah 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 blah. Well, I mean, at least maybe this is something that the annotations made clearer to me, but I think the assumption here is that it's, and actually no, there are actually some pretty clear sections. Now I'm thinking about it, in his encounters with this woman and him speaking about her, that where he's basically just admitting that their sexual desires, because he describe when he says, you know, he sees this girl and he says to Mephistopheles, I need to have this girl, and Mephistopheles is like, whoa, slow down a minute, you know, I need to figure out this, we need to set the framework for this, and he's like, I can't wait for that, like, and he's like, isn't it so much better like when you have like this like titillating like long process of like wooing and stuff? And he says, yeah, I've appetite enough without all that. So he's basically just like, I don't think it's
like, I saw her once, I need to fuck her right now.
Also, actually no, it doesn't say how old she is, but
I've done some research on this, and it basically seems like throughout different hints and historical context, you could estimate her being around 14 to 16 and him being around 40 to 50. So that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, it says she's past her 14th year in here, and yeah, like you said, like she's like just housework at her home, like she's not in a part of her life where she's being courted, so you assume that she's like very young. I mean, that's just a whole another like barrel of snakes to open up and talk about.
Yeah, obviously that just is horrible, but we'll just ignore that for historical reasons, I guess. I don't know. It's like,
I guess so.
It's like when you listen to a conservative podcast and then something comes up about slavery and it was different back then, so let's just ignore that.
Exactly. I thought you were going to say when you listen to a conservative podcast and they talk about 14-year-olds.
No. No, that's the liberal podcast.
Anyway, so yeah, from the very beginning, so he goes with this like this I want to be in bed with this girl as soon as possible, and you need to help me. You need to help me do this. But they kind of end up going. They end up deciding that they'll woo her. Firstly, by giving her all this treasure, all this jewelry and stuff. And there was this cool part in the end of this chapter, which in the annotations, which I didn't know before. But it says that. So Mephistopheles says, Faust says, "I'll take her a present. Get one at once." To which Mephistopheles says, "Presents already? Very charming. He'll succeed. I know some interesting places where buried treasures left its traces. I'll reconnoitre it. Yes, indeed." And apparently, in popular belief, the devil has the knowledge of buried treasure and the power to raise it. This comes up a couple times in Faust, but
I bet this is like. I bet if you want to go down this road, this is like some anti-Semite shit in German history. I bet.
There is a bit of anti-Semitism a bit later in the book. Actually,
I wouldn't be surprised,
basically in the next chapter, because so they end up giving her the treasure, and she's like bowled away by it. She's so excited, and she's wondering where it came from and who gave her it, and she's kind of speculating that it might have come from this man, but she ends up, her mum ends up finding out about it, and it's heavily implied that they're quite religious people. And so the mum contacts the local priest, who comes over and looks at the treasure and is like, "Oh, this treasure, it smells bad. It smells demonic. I better take this, because only the church knows what to do to deal with this." And so there are some quite funny kind of criticisms of the church in
but also he was literally right, so
yeah, no, he was literally right as well. But I think there is, when they're talking about this, they also talk about how Jews do this as well.
Yeah.
It's like Jews and kings love to hoard treasure too, basically. Is what they say in the book.
Let's clarify that. That's not what Nick is thinking right now, but that's what they say in the book.
Don't make this sound like a dog whistle, because it's not.
Oh god. I forgot if this happens before or after this scene, but Faust also gets this potion from a witch that makes him young.
Right, I forgot about that.
So we should mention that, because that otherwise it doesn't make sense if he's like this old fucking doctor academic guy courting this young woman. So he's so fucking creepy and trying to rape this girl, basically, that he changes his appearance using magic to being like a young stud again. So yeah, that's also cool.
Yeah, great. Love it. The courting of Gretchen continues. Also, I wanted to ask you about this. In the German version, there was quite a lot of discussion in the annotations of my book about the Gretchen's name. When we meet her, she's called Margaret. Mm-hmm. But as she gets ensnared by Mephistopheles and Faust, she gets referred to as Gretchen, which is like just what's the word? Like a shortened version of the name, right?
Yeah.
Is this the same in the German version as well?
The implication, so Margarete.
Right.
And then she becomes Gretchen, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the implication is that she's as she's being corrupted, she's also changing. And she actually becomes Margaret towards the end of the book again. as the final drama occurs.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I was thinking of, I don't know, there's all like these names these days that we think of as obvious. Like, I guess Greta also comes from the same thing then, from the same Margaret root. And
Sure.
yeah, you forget that back then people had like a handful of biblical names and they kind of evolved to many names we have today. But
yeah, good point. So
Lakeisha.
Yeah. The quote here in the annotations, the Gretchen scenes which begin here are taken from the Faust with very little alteration. For his stage and dialogue directions, Goethe uses the full form of the heroine's name, Margareta, chiefly in the scenes before she is seduced, but also in the final scene just before her death. In the remaining scenes, nearly all after the seduction, he uses the diminutive form Gretchen. This form is also nearly always used when she's addressed or referred to within the dialogue itself, though variants of the diminutive Margaretlane, Gretelchen occur once or twice. Just a little bit of additional information there.
Okay, so thank you for that. And from then on, what happens is, as you said, the courting of Gretchen continues, and there's another treasure, and this time they kind of figure out that they shouldn't, or it's Gretchen and her neighbor talking, and they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't show this to your mom. Just keep it to yourself."
Yep.
And which she does, and then they have some scheme where Mephistopheles finds out that the neighbor's wife is the neighbor of Gretchen, I mean, who is also a woman, that her husband is abroad or something, and then he like comes to the house and is like, "I'm bringing you news of your husband's death. And by the way, I have like a friend who wants to get into Gretchen's pants. Can we talk?" And
yeah. So he engineers this way in, and describes this really like unnecessarily mean description of her husband, who I think is implied to be a soldier who like dies. And she, Martha, the neighbor, is like, "Where, is there anything that he's left for me?" And he's like, "I'm sorry, but he spent all his last money on prostitutes and stuff, and he, on his deathbed, he said how much of a nag his wife was his whole life, and she's just her whole life was just destroyed by this one guy." And he's like, "I have this other guy here to testify." Called Faust,
which also seems so strange, because the whole purpose is to get Gretchen in the mood for fucking, but then he brings up the story of how men are basically horrible, but somehow it doesn't affect Gretchen. Somehow she's like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah. So yeah, Gretchen, how does Gretchen respond to all of this? She basically just falls in love immediately with Faust, who's, this wealthy, younger than 40, attractive man. And this pretty typical kind of, it almost feels like some kind of like film noir thing, where this woman's like fawning over this man who's just like, but he's also, I guess, the thing is, he's what I think is so like great about this is like in terms of like his language, like it's all this like typical romantic language that you kind of get from like Shakespeare or something, where it's like, talking about how fair someone is, talking about like their beauty and how blinding it is, and all these like lovely like flowery romantic ways of describing things. But we also know his intention, and it kind of like, yeah, just takes out all the gives you all that context about, even though all this language is feels so like proper and like it's courting and it's nightly and whatever, but it's actually just like backed by this very, very base desire that he can't quell in himself, that he can't like get over.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good place to bring this point up, but I think one of the biggest issues I had with the book is just that the romance itself is just so bad. I don't know how to put this. Like, if you watch like your conventional romance movie or read romance book or whatever, usually they spend most of the time on establishing the romance. Why do they like each other? They see each other every day, and there's like these little quirks about their behavior that make them fall in love over a period of time. And then there's this phase where they're trying to deny it, and they're, oh no, I don't really love him. But then he's away, and then they miss him, and then, oh, I guess I do love him. And then, whereas like in this book, first of all, the amount of time that Faust and Gretchen actually talk to each other is like 5 minutes at most. And
yeah,
then like he literally sees her on the street and is like, I have boners, so I guess I will dedicate my life to fucking her in many ways now. And then she is like, oh, he has the money, let's do it. It's like the most fucking superficial characters ever.
But that is also the point though, right? Like,
I guess so, yeah. But yeah.
So what I would say to that is like, firstly, Gretchen is constantly described as like being very, very naive. But she also accepts the treasure. She accepts the jewelry, which maybe that's like this kind of like, that's like the first step into hell for her. And this is referenced later on in the book when Gretchen's brother, who's a soldier, returns and ends up basically calling her a whore in front of everyone.
This was so funny.
But what he kind of describes is like, you opened yourself up to this man too early, and now you'll open yourself up to everyone in the village, kind of thing. And the instead of being chaste. So his whole thing is like, but maybe that also connects to the treasure, because that's like, you're accepting this gift. You don't know where it came from, and you don't ask where it came from. And that kind of like willful ignorance is a sin in itself. And from breaking the ice, like taking that first step, it just gets worse and worse from there. What I will say, there is something that kind of complicated that theory, at least for me, which is that she clearly recognizes that Mephistopheles is evil, because she speaks a lot about how much she hates to see him, but she doesn't say that about Faust himself. So even though there is like kind of this implication that maybe it's because of her faith, she has this like correct judgment about certain things, but she doesn't have it about Faust. She
has
doesn't
that
have
devil radar. Yeah, she can tell.
But it doesn't apply to Faust for some reason.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, then there's this scene where he chases her in the garden for a little bit, and she pretends to like run away, and then there's a kiss, and then Faust had the kiss, and then he's like, okay, what's next? How do we get into panties? And so Mephistopheles is like, well, you could just and then he talks to Gretchen, and she's like, we're having, I would like to let you stay over at my place, but my mom wouldn't like that because I'm a child. You remember how I'm a child? And then Faust's like, you could give this potion to your mom. It'll just make her sleep. Of course it kills her. And which is like at this point we've clearly stepped over a bound. Like if everything was okay for you so far and you're like, I guess she's a bit young, but whatever, the times, and like at this point we've clearly stepped over a line where he's like, I guess I'll murder her mom if I can fuck her. Like
I think I think even worse though than that, I think what happens is they give her the potion like numerous times. So it's not even that she dies immediately. It's like she has like a slow death. As like all this just, you know, grotesque shit is happening. But yeah, so she ends up dying. And this is by Gretchen's own hand as well.
So it's not just him murdering the mum; it's he makes her kill the mum, which just makes it worse. And
so she's getting further and further implicated in this like, you know, sinful thing.
And this makes me really think that he clearly doesn't actually love her, because if he did, like, you literally, like, it's impossible to do this kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, yeah. And like Gretchen she's kind of like, I think, kind of treated as slightly, I think she is, one of the reasons that she is so young, or that she has to be so young for the sake of the story, is because she has to be naive and kind of like, kind of not absolved of like her actions, but like there has to be like a naivety that would allow for that kind of manipulation to happen.
Right. Okay. That's how we can get around the pedophilia. You figured it out. Good job.
No, I'm saying that she
no, I don't. You're right. I'm just trolling you.
God damn it. So then what happens next? Gretchen's brother comes. Oh, actually, no. She finds that she's pregnant, I think.
See, this is so annoying, because it's a lot of these things with the mother dying as well and her pregnancy. Like, I completely read over that in my first, like, just reading, and like, you could read this and you wouldn't even know that she was pregnant. And then later at some point they're like, oh yeah, remember how I was pregnant? And I was like, what?
Yeah. I think it only became clear to me when Gretchen's brother Valentine came and started saying that she's a whore and stuff. But even then, it's not like, you know, maybe this is like a, you know, censorship in the time for proper, you know, maybe it's something that you couldn't get away with writing. I mean, to be honest,
I don't know.
I don't know if you can get away with writing that today. Like,
I mean, you could at least say that, like, she was pregnant. I don't know, but
I don't know though. I don't know.
Yeah, it was just the reading experience was severely impeded by that, I feel like, a lot of the times. And it's like, you know, it's a play, so I guess if you see it on a screen and she is like visibly pregnant, that helps. But yeah, if you're just reading this, it's very unclear.
For sure.
But yeah, as you said, the brother challenges Faust to a duel, because he's like, you fucked my child sister, so I guess we fight to the death now. And obviously Mephistopheles steps in and he like god modes Faust, so he kills the brother. And then at his dying, like, as you said earlier, this I was kind of laughing because this was just so weird. But as you know, Gretchen runs to her dying brother, he's like, you whore, you've had one boyfriend, you might as well have fucked the whole city. May you burn in hell forever.
Yes.
Which, like, on the one hand, yes, he's completely correct that Faust is corrupting her and that this is going to lead to her downfall. And also, obviously, she's too young. On the other hand, it just seems like, you know, if you're if your sister had a boyfriend, you wouldn't try to kill him and curse her, right? I don't know.
I mean, he's also dying. Like, you know, is he gonna be perfect logic lord, like rational guy?
No, but
like,
even before that, like his first action was not to talk to her about it. It was like, I guess I have to kill him. Like,
yeah, sure.
and he didn't know that Faust was having like help by the devil and that all this background shit. Like the information he knows is my sister is having a child. I guess I'll kill her husband. Like I guess I'll kill the boyfriend.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sure.
Which is not super helpful in any case, but
I guess so. I mean, she is like 14, so it's, you know. But I see what you're saying.
I mean, the babies come from somewhere, though, right? If every person acted like this brother, there wouldn't be any humans left, right?
Yes. So, what happens next? Again, you know, this wasn't immediately obvious to me when I was reading it until actually the very last chapter. But Gretchen apparently drowns her illegitimate child, and is then convicted of murder. There is like a lot of stuff before that which kind of washed over me, especially the Walpurgisnacht section.
I want to talk about that. Yeah.
So we go into this weird like Midsummer Night's Dream thing where we have all these Shakespearean characters coming in, and I have no fucking idea why, and I really don't understand what any of this means. But prior to that, they start climbing a mountain, I think.
Yeah, so give me a sec here. So there's this. I can shed some light on this. So I'm actually from this fucking region, and from my smallest hometown, I see that mountain every day. And we have a festival. Yeah, we have this Walpurgis festival literally in our town. So
no way. What?
Yeah, so I think it's I'm from Goslar, and you can see the Brocken mountain. You can see it from the city. And there is another small town called Bad Harzburg. Shout out to my friend Max, who is from there. Or they have this festival actually every year, and you could go there and people dress up as witches and drink.
No way. Wow.
So yeah, the mythology of Walpurgis predates Faust, but certainly being mentioned in Faust gave it kind of a boost in popular knowledge. Apparently it's very old, like older than Christianity or some, comes from the like pagan shit.
Pagan stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know when exactly that specific mountain, the Brocken, which basically in English means like the lump.
Right.
Was implied in that mythology. But yeah, the idea is that one day in, oh God, is it like September or something? I might be wrong.
In the book?
But I know in the book and also in real life, like there's one day in the year. Well, you can Google it if you care, but I think it's in autumn. One day in the year, all the witches climb up the mountain, and they have a big debauchery orgy with the devils, and it's like, I guess the kind of thing around for normal people is don't go up that mountain on that day because it's fucked up.
That's interesting. Another, so like the theme of witches and alchemy and black magic run throughout this book, and an interesting thing that I found out when I was reading this is apparently the last witch burning in Germany happened in, I think it was 1782, which was basically after the Urfaust was written. So as Faust was being written, witches were actually still kind of a part of daily life or daily consciousness.
But that's fine because after 1800, people didn't do fucked up shit anymore in Germany. So only until 1800. From there on, it was all good.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Can you believe they burned people until the 1790s? That's fucked up, bro.
How crazy. We would never. 20th century, we'd never. A interesting thing from the annotations, a guy who is part of this procession climbing the mountain, maybe when they're on the top. His name is Mr. R.C. Fantasi. That's the name translated. Apparently, proctophantasmist is the word that Goethe uses, which comes from the Greek words anus apparition. But apparently this was actually a bit of satire aimed at this critic who Goethe had a bit of beef with, called Friedrich Nicolai, who apparently he shat all over the Sorrows of Werther, which is Goethe's one of Goethe's main works. And Goethe considered him this he was this quote unquote enlightened Philistine guy that Goethe absolutely hated, and so he literally includes this guy as a character in the story just so he can kind of shit all over him, which I think is just brilliant and so petty.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Faust climbs up this mountain on the invitation of Mephistopheles, and then a bunch of weird spirits appear. Some of them there's a play inside a play, so it talks about Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. The characters in there appear there. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to mean. I looked up about it, and no one really seems to know. Most people say it's just for comedic relief before the tragedy. So I think it's fair to let it stand at that. But yeah, he just puts in a bunch of petty jokes, basically. So
yeah. Yeah, it's not really obvious why. It's quite a big chapter as well, I think.
Yeah.
This Walpurgisnight's Dream.
Well, the one thing that does happen is he sees a spirit that looks like Gretchen on the mountain.
Right.
And then he's like,
yes.
All right. So Mephistopheles is like, look at that witch over there. Doesn't she look hot? And then Faust is like, yeah, I guess I'll fuck her. And as he does, being devoted to the love of his life, Gretchen, he goes on a big witch orgy on the mountain. And then as he's about to do it, he sees this spirit that looks like Gretchen, kind of a sad Gretchen. And he mentions this to Mephistopheles, who says, nah, don't worry about it. This just shows everyone the person that they like. So, yeah, you're good. It's not the real one. And I don't know, yeah. We're still trying to pretend like Faust is in love with Gretchen, whereas every action he's ever taken clearly shows that he's not in love with her. So
Well, I think you need to drop the love thing, because that's if he was genuinely in love with her, he would have lost the bet with Mephistopheles anyway, right?
I guess so, yeah.
A thing to add on top of that as well, I think there's a parallel in that section with a point earlier in the book. I think it's when they're in a witch's chamber, where Faust is he's distracted by this mirror, and he says when he steps back from the mirror, he can see this beautiful woman in it. I think that is also an allusion to that point in the book as well. Isn't she referred to as Helen in this
I
Walpurgisnacht?
didn't pick up on that. I don't know.
But anyway, on the Walpurgisnacht dream thing, in the annotations it says that this like Shakespearean association thing isn't very developed in the literature. So there's not really much like there aren't many people like who have any idea about it generally.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's like a bit of comedic relief, and also with the Gretchen appearance, a bit of foreshadowing that Gretchen is not doing great right now while you are fucking demons on a mountain. So, yeah, then he comes back from the mountain, and pretty much we go into the final happenings of the story, the tragedy reaching its climax. So Faust learns that Gretchen is imprisoned, and I still don't know why he does this, because he's pretty much working towards fucking up her life, but for some reason he decides that he has to break her out of prison. And Mephistopheles is like, it's kind of a lot of work, and Faust's like, let's go. So then they end up going, and then we have the most like annoying dialogue, I feel like, but this is so characteristic of, I feel, male and female relationships, where first of all, apparently the potion doesn't work anymore, so Faust looks like a 50-year-old dude now, which makes Gretchen not even recognize him, and she's just kind of in there.
That's why she doesn't recognize him, right? I was wondering why that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think maybe that's sense. The implication. I don't know if it explicitly says that the potion doesn't work anymore, but I think the implication is because she looks like a different person to her, the potion has worn off or something like that.
Right.
So, yeah, she's like, who is this old guy? And, he's like, it's me. I love you, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, oh, it is your voice indeed. And he's like, oh, we have to get out of here. I took care of the guards. Like, we got to go now because they'll hang you tomorrow. We got to go right now. And she's like, first you have to kiss me. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to kiss you, but we have to go right now. We don't have time for kisses. And she's like, well, I'm not going until you kiss me. And I was like, oh my God, women. But then at the same time, you're like, why doesn't he just fucking kiss her? Then he can leave. And it's like,
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I literally don't love you anymore, which I'm not going to say, but I'm not going to kiss you. And so she won't leave. And yeah, I'll hand over the stick to you.
Yeah, so she refuses to leave. And then we have, I guess, the essential kind of, the essential ending. She kind of starts pleading to God. Mephistopheles is, quickly getting impatient. He's saying that we need to leave. The sun's almost come up. And so I'll read the quote. She says, "O Father, save me, do not reject me. I am yours. O holy angels, receive me under your wings, surround me, protect me. Heinrich, you frighten me." Heinrich referring to Faust. Mephistopheles, "She is condemned." A voice from above, "She is redeemed." Mephistopheles to Faust, "Come to me." He vanishes with Faust. Margaretta's voice from the cell dying away, "Heinrich, Heinrich." So we have the first appearance of God in the actual material world. A voice from above saying she is redeemed. So it ends. So how does it end? Right, it ends with Margareta dying, but she's saved by God. Mm-hmm. And we also have Mephistopheles trying to condemn her before she dies. But it's negated by God.
Yes. Now, before we go into the final analysis and everything, let's take a quick break, I would say.
Okay, we are back. So, if you've been listening along, you will know that we have got through the whole of Faust up until the very last part, where Margareta dies, but is redeemed by God in her final moments.
The whole of part one.
The whole of part one. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, obviously, is the kind of comeback of Christianity. Throughout the book, you kind of wonder, is Goethe trying to shit on Christianity or not? And then it seems like, well, if she is forgiven for being a completely brainless character who killed her own child and her mother, and at the end, she wants to be forgiven simply because she doesn't want to die, like, there's no reason that, like, it's not like she did anything great that would redeem herself. She's just like, I don't want to die. Please don't kill me. And God's like, okay. So,
yeah.
And I guess she still dies, but she goes to heaven, I guess is what that means.
Yeah, she goes to heaven. Yeah. You know, there's all this, like, there's all this, you know, talk about how she's descending into sin, and there's this clear, like, you know, and it's represented in the language as well, how we talked about how the word Gretchen, how the name Gretchen is used. It seems like clear that he's trying to, like, you know, show how this character is getting corrupted. And, you know, show how she's, like, through the people around her, especially like Friedrich, saying how she's, like, strayed from this path and how she's no longer innocent anymore. She's lost her innocence. But in the end, it doesn't matter. And I think it reminded me of Genesis, like, reading through this. But I remember in our discussion of Genesis, like, one of the things that I found, and maybe this is just, like, maybe I need to go back and read up. Maybe this is a misunderstanding on my part, but you know, my kind of understanding was that there's, you know, that there is still consequence to your actions, and within, like, the Christian framework. And one of my original, like, takeaways and criticisms of the Christianity that we came to learn about through Genesis was that, like, it's almost a cheat code to be innocent. It's almost like if you've never done any action, moral or immoral, in your life, that's better than doing something immoral, even if you get to a point where you kind of realize the error in your ways and then commit to a good life, like commit to a moral life within that framework.
But Gretchen's not innocent, isn't that kind of the point?
No, but yes, yeah. But my point is that the implication is that if she hadn't done anything wrong, then her innocence would have carried her to heaven anyway, just purely because she hadn't done anything wrong to begin with. But in my mind, it's like, and like, well, what I'm trying to say with when I'm talking about Genesis is that my kind of takeaway was that, you know, innocence is the best situation to be in. But as soon as you start doing bad things, then you build up this debt, and that has to go answered for someday. But for her, it doesn't seem to actually make any difference because she just prays it away and is saved.
Yeah, is this because she was too naive? Like the same way you wouldn't put a 12-year-old in prison because they didn't know better? I don't know. Like, she clearly knew that killing the child is wrong, and she seems to be upset about that. But I don't know.
She also doesn't want to escape. It's kind of like she's not. She didn't strike me as like I want to receive my punishment. But it did also. It wasn't.
Well, yeah. At the end, she even is like, "I'm not gonna leave because I'm guilty. Like, just take me, Satan, or God, or whoever. Just punish me." She says something like that.
Okay, if she says something like that, then maybe that is the redeeming thing, is that she accepts that she needs to be punished for what she did.
Yeah. Also, we just kind of gloss over this in the flow of the story. It's like, oh yeah, you get pregnant and you kill a child. Like, it's obvious, but why the fuck? Like, if this, yeah, because it's a play, it makes sense, I guess. But like, if you just think about this, like, you wouldn't kill your child if you didn't have a good reason, right? Like, Faust apparently doesn't even know that she's pregnant. Like, usually,
Right.
if this was like a regular romance, like, you would at least be like, hey, I'm pregnant. Can you, like, you are wealthy, right? Can we figure this out? Like, maybe we get married. You said you love me, right? She's just like, nah, I'm pregnant. I guess I'll just have to kill it. There's only one way. I have to kill it right away.
I think there was like a this might have been in the it's probably around Friedrich's section, where they talk about how she's going to be like ostracized for having a child. There's this like it's like torn up hay or something.
Yeah, like, they bully her, basically. They like smash her window or something. But
yeah, but there's this like ritual which they which she's like afraid of being like, yeah, being ostracized by the people in.
But even then, it's like, if he just marries her and they just talk about it and then they start a household or whatever, problem solved. But it never even gets to that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point.
Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there were a lot of points in the story where, first of all, what actually happens isn't described. You kind of have to infer it, which was annoying. But then also, the things that do happen seem to happen very forcedly for the sake of the story. Like, we wanna have this whole redemption thing where she, like, it seems like Faust Goethe wanted to build up to this ending, and instead of what I would say a good writer would do is to craft a story and characters who believably lead up to that ending. It seems like he just skipped a bunch of parts for convenience sake and was just like, oh, we're at this ending now. Don't worry about it.
I mean, all I could say in defense of that is he's writing a tragedy, and that he needs it to be a tragedy more than anything else. But no,
exactly, and you can have that ending, you can have that tragedy.
Yeah.
Like, and I would say it would be so much more tragic if I actually felt like, if we get to that ending. Yeah. If you like really went through the story and you felt that, man, she really had no choice in this, and it all just kind of went so fast, and she just kind of wound up in this situation. But we don't even have that. It's just kind of, wait, I'm confused. What happened?
Right. And at best, all we have to explain this is that she's young and naive, which is, not even actually what is explicitly, doesn't seem to be what's actually explicitly given as the reason. But even if it was given as the explicit reason, it would be pretty unsatisfying, because it's like her naivety is the only thing that seems to drive her it seems to be that her naivety is the only reason that she ends up doing any of these things that end up going back to bite her. Yeah, that's a very fair point. I agree with you there. I
wanted to come back to something you. Sorry.
No. I was gonna move on, but go ahead.
Well, so you mentioned that them being both kind of shitty characters and, doing wrong choices, just kind of stumbling into this romance with no real love and just like base pleasures and naivete was kind of the point, right? So that got me thinking about, well, what really is Goethe trying to say? I know there's part two as well, but just looking at part one, like what really are we trying to get out of this? Like, is he trying to tell us that humans are naive? Is he trying to tell us that no matter what you do, you can be forgiven? Is he trying to tell us that, I don't like, what is he trying to tell us?
There may be an answer or something to help us out if we look at the way the book was put together. Apparently in Faust, which is the original writing for part one, Gretchen wasn't actually saved. So she was actually condemned to like the eternal suffering in the afterlife. And so, maybe you could kind of like, if I'm thinking about that as like, if I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a writer putting this together, for that to be the part which I'm finding difficult to figure out, maybe that's not the essential thing that I'm trying to tell.
Yeah. If that's a variable, then that's not the main point. Huh?
It's considering it's like pretty much the most ends up being like the how the book ends up being like the final word. It is super significant, but for it to be also something that has actually changed really kind of makes me doubt that like what he's trying to say is that we can be redeemed no matter what. But I don't know. I don't know.
Another issue is that Faust just isn't a relatable character. Like the way he starts out, if Goethe is trying to tell us something about how Faust is behaving and maybe how his behavior is wrong, or how base pleasures or whatever aren't the answer to happiness in life, it's just hard to relate to Faust because we start from a position of perfect knowledge and achievement in life, basically. And who can say that about themselves? Like, who is like, I've read every book, I've succeeded at being a doctor, there's nothing left for me on earth. Like, no one actually feels that way, right?
Absolutely. And also, you kind of think from maybe talking about what Goethe meant, when you start reading the book in the beginning and, Faust is saying, I've done A to Z, I've done all this, but I'm really compelled by nature, and I'm really compelled by this like romantic idea I have about the world. Is that what is being said here? But I also think that there's no like definitive statement on from Goethe here about what he thinks about that, maybe because or maybe I don't know, like Faust's whole kind of like all his writing about like all his dialogue about nature, I find a little bit just like annoying. Like, gonna disregard, firstly, I mean, for the first thing, like disregarding what knowledge can do, but also we get this when he goes on the walk with Wagner in one of the early chapters. We get to see like a bunch of kind of the common folk like going about their business and stuff, and he also romanticizes them as well. He kind of talks about how they have this like almost, it's kind of like pretty patronizing, like they have this like a down to earth lifestyle, where it's great to say that when you're in a position of like comfort and you're excelling in your career, and maybe you are spiritually dissatisfied, so you start looking at these people and going, oh, look at them, they have nothing and they're so happy, and they're
They don't
so
know all
happy
the
in
shit
their,
I know.
yeah, they're so happy in their ignorance, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
That's
know
also
if,
who's going to be reading your book, by the way. But
yeah, I don't know if that's a criticism from Goethe or if that's what Goethe is trying to also like, you know, advocate, that kind of thinking.
Well, it does definitely feel like there's some part of how Goethe really feels reflected in Faust, right? Being like a scholar and having
The parallels with
achieved
Faust and Goethe, for
things.
sure. So
Yeah.
a bit about Goethe as well. Yeah, he wasn't just a writer, but he was like a politician. He was an alchemist. Like a physicist, or he did all these like things in his life, huge achievements, and
He mainly worked for the government, which is why
Yeah,
Nietzsche is a
yeah.
much better writer, because he did not work for the government.
Yeah. Apparently, he was you know, he was like a big force in a lot of just like public life culture things, whether like things like the opera and public parks and things like that. So he is like very much this kind of like, yeah, master planner, statesman as well, which is interesting. If you were Goethe, what would this character do for you? If we were to assume that Goethe, as this like accomplished person, has this kind of is come towards this spiritual wall, what does Faust tell Goethe? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I can't figure that quite out, because Goethe also, like, one of his main themes is always romance. And in The Sorrows of Young Werther, we also have like a tragic romance that doesn't end up well. And I think Goethe in his private life also had some bad romances. And I think I can't pin anyone down specifically, but what I've generally heard about like a mainstream interpretation of Goethe's idea on romance is that it's not as beautiful as the books make it look like, and that real romance is actually very mundane and kind of sucks. Like in a book you can read about a great romance, but in real life you have to wake up next to that person and they smell, and then you have to like bicker about what to do for lunch today, and just kind of, but again, I don't know what the real motivation behind that is except nihilism.
Yeah, I've also heard that. That's that idea of Goethe's idea of romance. It also doesn't tell us anything about this book either.
No.
You know? Aside from, I guess, this like pessimistic view of courting, as you know, which actually, to be honest, I think is probably quite helpful. You know, we have all this like mythology and ideology about courting in the 17th, 18th, 19th century and going back to the medieval ages and whatever, and all this flowery language to describe this this romantic thing, like loving experience. But here, what I did quite like about this was how it was very, like, Faust is so, he's like clearly not in two minds, but like he uses this like pure romantic language to describe something that he knows is just purely sexual. So I liked how it felt very like modern, or it felt kind of timeless almost to read that kind of critique, or read it as a critique, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we'll have some more time to figure out what it all means when we do part 2 of this, but
part 2.
Yeah, so
obviously
far
we have
I'm a
no
bit
idea
stumped.
how does the pact end. we don't know. I wanted to make a little detour to talk about the language in the version that I read. So yeah, like I said, I was reading the new translation in Oxford World Classics by David Luke, and it rhymes, so it is translated as a poem. And so I want you to go to where is it? Let me find this section first.
Some English German translation moments. Stay tuned for that, guys.
So it's in chapter 13, The Neighbor's House. So this in this section, Martha and Margareta. So Martha is Margareta's neighbor. They meet, and this is after Margareta is given the second box of treasure by Faust. This is the one that she keeps from her mother. And this is kind of the moment where she accepts this like sinful treasure. Mephistopheles enters, and this is when he starts talking about the Martha's dead lover, and it's around line 2900.
Yeah, I don't have any numbers.
That's fine. But what I noticed was quite like, and I also noticed this when Wagner was speaking with Faust, was how the rhyme scheme was used for like creative application between characters talking. So in this situation, Mephistopheles, he rhymes, his lines rhyme with the previous lines of the women speaking. So an example, Mephistopheles enters. I'll go down a little bit. In fact, no, I'll start here. If I may be so bold, forgive me, ladies, I'm looking for Frau Martha Schwertlein, who lives here, I'm told. Martha, that's me. How can I oblige you, sir? Mephistopheles, aside to her. Now that I know you, that will do. You have a fine lady visiting you. Excuse my taking the liberty. I'll call again later when you're free. Martha, do you hear that, child? What a rigmarole. He takes you for a lady, bless your soul. Margareta, oh, sir, you're much too kind to me. I'm a poor young woman. This jewellery I'm trying on isn't mine. Mephistopheles, why, it's not just the jewels that are fine. You have a manner, a look in your eyes. Then I may stay? What a pleasant surprise. Martha, now I'm sure your business is interesting. Mephistopheles, I hope you'll pardon the news I bring. I'm sorry to grieve you at our first meeting. Your husband is dead and sends his greeting. So, it's a bit ham-fisted, the way I've given it out, but we have Margareta's line, I'm trying on, it isn't mine, rhymed with Mephistopheles' reply, which is why it's not just the jewels that are fine. We have mine and fine. Then when Martha chimes in, she ends her line with interesting, and Mephistopheles replies, ending his line with I bring. So he rhymes against the statement, and I thought maybe this is kind of like I don't know if I want to know what it's like in the German version, but
it rhymes. I found a place, so it or from where, I mean, I'll just read the German a bit. From where should I read?
So Mephistopheles enters, but the section is, oh sir, you're much too kind to me. I'm a poor young woman. This jewellery I'm trying on, it isn't mine. That's what Margareta says.
Wait, did I just lose it? Oh my god.
But boys.
Oh, wait, it's fucking Marthy and Margaret. Ja, okay. Okay. Ich bin ein armes junges Blut. Ach Gott, der Herr ist ganz gar zu gut. Schmuck und Geschmeide sind nicht mein. Ach, es ist nicht der Schmuck allein. Sie hat ein Wesen, einen Blick so scharf. Wie freut mich's, dass sie bleiben darf. Was bringt er denn? Verlange sehr. Ich hätt eine frohe mehr. Ich hoffe, sie lässt mich drum nicht büßen. Ihr Mann ist tot und lässt sie grüßen.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad that
I
is consistent.
kind of butchered that, but
so I kind of
also yeah.
Sorry, go on.
He uses this word mehr, which I've never then the umlaut A with the R. I have never heard this word, and it's kind of central to the thing that you just read. So I was just kind of confused. But
embarrassing.
Yeah.
So
no, it rhymes the same way as you said. Yeah.
My kind of like interpretation of this was that this is part of like Mephistopheles' seduction and like manipulation by like rhyming with them. He's like coercing them and appealing to them and like mimicking them in a way that like that allows him to get into their trust. There's also a section I noticed at the beginning with Wagner and Faust, which is probably also we can probably also assume is rhyming in the German original as well, where Wagner rhymes against sorry, my earphones are fucking up. Wagner rhymes against Faust's lines, which I kind of interpreted as he's kind of like a lapdog, kind of loving every word that Faust says, and wanting to mimic him and wanting to be like him. And there are also some parts, I guess, where we go from rhyme to just normal prose, which I think are also probably trying to like punctuate things, especially when like God is talking in the prologue. I noticed that God kind of tended to reply in single lines that broke up the devil's rhymes, and I'm not sure. I don't think any of his lines rhymed, which feels pretty intentional.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, when you write the whole book in poems, this is bound to happen eventually, but some of the rhymes in German feel incredibly forced, which kind of took a bit of momentum out of it. I'm not saying that I could have done it better or anything, because I can't rhyme for shit, but there were definitely parts where you're like, he's probably spent like 20 minutes here, and it's like, I guess I'll just go with this.
There was an interesting part in a couple parts that were mentioned in the in asterisks in the annotation of the book the edition that I was reading, which also showed where different sections were sewn together. So it's kind of like you come across a section which appears like particularly clunky, and there's a little asterisk saying like, the reason this looks clunky is because he was trying to sew these two sections together and just didn't do a very good job of it. Which I think is quite funny too.
How is it, I'm curious, in the UK, when kids have to read Shakespeare in school, how is it received? Because I think from all I've heard, in like with exceptions, I'm sure, but if you have to read Faust in German class and then it's a bunch of like poems that rhyme and it's all this flowery shit, then most high schoolers probably look at this for 5 minutes and go, nah, that's gay.
I think I can't really remember how it was like received. We did do quite a lot of Shakespeare in school though. We did King Lear. We did what's it called? Tempest. Midsummer Night's Dream.
So were people happy about that, or were they like, "Oh no, not Shakespeare"?
Honestly, I don't remember there being a huge amount of resistance, but I was also in the nerd class for English lit, which might have
Well, but I mean, let's be the nerd class in Wales means like, I mean, slightly below average IQ coal miners.
It wasn't a statement about IQ. It was a statement about how pliable everyone is to the authority in school.
I'm sorry.
It's like, oh, we're doing Shakespeare. I don't have the faculty to complain about this.
The mental faculty. Okay. I had to go there. It's jokes, everyone. It's just jokes.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, in Germany, everyone hates Faust. In school, at least. And so I was, reading it now. I enjoyed it, and I feel like it's kind of a necessary read just to understand overall literature, culture, and there are so many references about Faust that it's helpful to have read it. So far, I don't hate it, but I'm not like loving it either, and I this is not a kind of Nietzsche moment where I'm like, oh, this guy's genius.
100%. Yeah. I think I've come left with pretty much the same feeling. I didn't know what to expect at all. I guess I can appreciate like his place in the canon. I am maybe part 2 will like make things clearer for me where he like why he fits in and why he's important. And I don't want to just reject something that I don't fully understand. But it was not like definitely wasn't like I haven't come away from it feeling like I've got a new tool in my mental or my spiritual arsenal. I don't feel like or even kind of gained a perspective on other things through it. Even the Faustian bargain as a concept in itself, like I don't know really what this book does to help me understand what that term is.
The idea of a deal with the devil is pretty much ubiquitous, but in this book, as we said, it just seems more like a nihilistic bargain than anything else, right? There's no way for him to win this, so why did he even enter into it in the first place? Yeah.
And like a Faustian bargain is like a moral trade-off for a moral trading your soul for some material benefit. But I don't know. I just don't know.
It's not like Faust really seems to have benefited so far, right? It's just a lot more misery, and there's like some sexual pleasure, but it's not like the genie where you wish for a bunch of money and then the genie gives you money or something,
Yeah. You don't have. It's not that you have more knowledge. It's not that you have more power. It's not that you have more money.
More like I'll get you a botched romance.
And I mean, maybe. I guess that's probably the point, but again, you just kind of think like, who the hell would do this? Like it sounds, and maybe it's a stupid question, but like, who the fuck would do this? Like, I find it really hard to get into the position of Faust, where it's like,
yeah, he's the most unrelatable character with the most unrelatable choices, pretty much.
Yeah. So I do wonder what about his like character appealed so much to people that they put him in such a high position in like the canon. I'm sure there's some a good reason behind it, but yeah, it's not super clear for me reading it. Would you recommend this book?
Well, would I recommend this book? Overall, not in my top 10, but it's probably better to have read it than not. And I will reserve further judgment until we finish part 2 in the next episode.
Yes. I would also say that it's not, it's definitely unnecessarily long, but it's also not long.
No.
It's not a long read, which is actually, if you can get you can smash it out in a couple of days very easily. Obviously, it's one of those things that you want to pore over and you want to pay attention to. And I think you probably gain a lot from reading around it as well. But it's not like thousands of pages of like super 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 dense stuff. And I did find actually that like there were sections that read quite nicely and mixed in with the sections that read horribly.
Mm-hmm. One more thing I noticed now that we're thinking about doing part 2 and everything, it's the title of the book in German is Faust, der Tragödie, erster Teil. So the first part of the tragedy. So he's already telling you it's going to end in a tragedy from the get-go. So that's one way to take momentum out of it, of course. But also,
sure,
I wonder why he chose to do that. Like, obviously, he wants to make it known that this is a tragedy, but usually you would just know that by reading it, right? Like, everything is horrible and the ending is also bad, therefore it's a tragedy. Like, why do you think did he need to call it that in the title?
Okay, well, firstly, in at least in English, it's Faust seems to just be called Faust.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. It's not called a tragedy, at least not in any edition that I've come across, and according to the Wikipedia page too. I don't know. Maybe it's trendy to. It's the Divine Comedy. It's the tragedy.
Maybe it's like Faust, the tragedy. Okay. Why not just Faust? It's what I'm thinking, but
yeah, I don't know.
Oh well, we will answer that in the next video where we discuss
Hopefully
the ending and part 2 of Faust.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we will catch you in the part 2 at some point in the future. And yeah, see you in the next episode. Book Boys out.